It's Duchamp. The viewer brings him or herself to it and participates in the making of the art. But in the age of AI, I think it's the anti-Duchamp is what's happened. The viewer, the listener, is not participating in the creation of the art. And this is tragic. This is the most tragic thing about AI. The viewer, the listener, is being taken out of the process completely. It is now unnecessary for a viewer or a listener to even bother making art or participating in making art. All they need to do is have the tiniest idea of what they want to see, and the AI does everything. And they haven't created anything. It's not even their work. Do we become like the machine? And this is the danger, and this is what Minotaur is warning against, in a nutshell.
My question deals with your sort of narratives of fragmented bodies and outside. And I'm wondering from what angles you approach that, from, say, contemporary philosophy like Deleuze and Lyotard, or maybe from science fiction, or from your interest in Duchamp.
Any basis on modern art, whether it's visual or musical or theatrical or whatever, from people like Melam, James Joyce and Duchamp. I think the main impetus has been this century the idea that music and pictures aren't just feeble representations of reality, but they're a setting up of triggers that cause you to question life, in a nutshell. Because information comes at us so voraciously now, we seem to be over-imbued with information from the various medium forms. We can't analyze anything anymore. The French school was saying in the 60s that we're getting to a point where there is only the illusion of history, the illusion of a future. Those things are rapidly disappearing. We don't have a history anymore. We can't analyze. There's no time to analyze what happened last week. And once you have that situation where the past is becoming a grey area, by virtue of that fact, the future looks less like happening in a real sense. Only 15 years ago, people had some kind of expectations that we were going somewhere that had a point and a reason, and that the purpose was to make things better as we go on. That reasoning and that main objective has virtually disappeared. We feel that the only thing that we actually know about is living now, in today. And I think that's caused art to turn in on itself, and the body is becoming a new kind of canvas. That's why you're wearing what you're wearing, and your nose. There's it's the one thing you have power over, is your body and how it reacts to this very complex and chaotic situation. We have no power over the complexities of the fragmentation of life, and so we more and more go into our body. It kind of comes out of there.
Hello all. So, as the world continues to burn and go crazy, I've decided, again, to talk about my David Bowie Outside Leon project. This thing has really grown and continued for several years now, and so I have some things to say about Minotaur or Minotaur. I did the first seg in the summer of 2022, and I was sort of just improvising, and this Minotaur or Minotaur artist character which is mentioned in the David Bowie One Outside album. Actually, the Minotaur's name does not come up at all in the diary of Nathan Adler, the detective figure. I'm assuming some familiarity with David Bowie's One Outside here, people watching this talk, because I've done several talks on One Outside. I've talked about Minotaur, and I've done several talks with John Majori on Leon's Sessions of 94, which preceded Outside, and we talked about a lot of these things. And on this page, there's several things around this, and I want to talk specifically about like where the project has come and where it is now, and also I'll talk about David Bowie's version and how I've interpreted it and why I'm still doing this, and how I feel that it relates now to what's happening in the world. Because I think Bowie was seeing that trend 30 plus years ago, moving in a particular direction. I've talked about this many times, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. I want to say something else, relating it back to the things I've said in the past. First thing, Minotaur or Minotaur. Minotaur is the British UK pronunciation. I usually say Minotaur. I was born and raised in the US with American English. I'm not particularly proud of that. But, so sometimes I say Minotaur and sometimes I say Minotaur. It's the same thing. The Minotaur, this is a Greek a mythological figure originally really from Greek mythology, right? Daedalus and the Minotaur and this, the labyrinth. Actually, there's a very nice piece on Minotaur entitled "We Saw the Minotaur." And actually, you know, this is part 2, obsession. See part 1, incubation. Oh, there's an incubation section. I didn't even see this. Let me right now read this. Just a bit of this. Asterion was thus born, consecrated, mazed, and isolated. Rising, he found himself part man, pent up, revealed. He saw himself alone, part bull. Fallen in darkness, he yet endures. And that's part of the 10 etchings of Minotaur by this artist, Ayrton, that actually, you know, from the site, I took some of those drawings that he had done, that Bowie was interested in, was collecting 93, 94, 95, somewhere in there, around the time of Outside and Leon in 94, which shows the Minotaur suffering with, and suffering or dying or something. And in part 2 of this, the author of this article, which is lookingforsailor.wordpress, mentions, it's a blog really focused on Outside, that Bowie was interested in collecting these things and did his own series of drawings. In this, actually up there, I put that on for a reason. This is the Bowie's Minotaur. You can't really see it now, which I combined his version with some other elements that were things that I had created myself, with the wrap around my eyes, which is based on Bowie's acolyte character in the booklet of Outside, which was there also based on one of this outsider artist who wrapped his eyes and his body with fish attached, and that's also Bowie has. I didn't do the fish, something really fishy, Leon, but I sang about it, but I didn't put fish on my body. I didn't go that extreme. Anyway, getting back to Minotaur here. So, we have mention of Nietzsche. Of course, Nietzsche is hugely important for Bowie. And Picasso and Dali, but actually Picasso did a series of Minotaur images, and I also used one of those in my Minotaur film, and I'm using it now as part of the projections for the Minotaur Live. I'm going to talk about this. This is really what I want to talk about. But this, the incubation, talking about how Bowie's interest in the Minotaur developed in Picasso, and then there were the Ayrton, a series. And there's also this figure, and I did a double take because the name is Epstein, okay? Sir Jacob Epstein, who did, right, he was collecting this Les Fleurs du Mal, Hymn à la Beauté, and it's like, this thing with like the Minotaur surrounded by concubines, and it's a sexual rite. And this is Epstein. Okay? And maybe I will put in some of these images with this talk when I edit, because they're quite graphic actually. Picasso's Minotaur is here, 1958. Baudelaire, Are You From Heaven or Hell? Beauty that we adore. Who cares? A dreadful, huge, ingenuous monster you. So but your glance, your smile, your foot open a door upon an infinite I love but never knew. That's Baudelaire, Hymn to Beauty. And then we have this image, Hymn à la Beauté, which is the Epstein. And right, so this is very interesting, mentioning like Beauty and the Beast, and also like 1993's from Black Tie, White Noise, Miracle Good Night. There's this video where Bowie is just surrounded by scantily clad women, right? And it seems to be this thing, right? Like the Minotaur is surrounded. So it's sexuality and it's orgies and it's sacrifice. And so in the case of Bowie and Outside, he talks about how society has lost its God, or its faith in God, or its faith in religion. We have to create this new God. And in the Heart's Filthy Lesson video, for example, which I think is like the most important video that Bowie did for the Outside album, he did Strangers When We Meet, which was really kind of interesting in its own right, but it's a kind of lesser piece, I think, less important to the central story of Outside in the Minotaur. And then there was a Hollow Space with the Pet Shop Boys. It's something completely different. But, right, we have these tattooed, pierced, tribal-looking, but new tribal, circa mid-90s bunch. Kind of in this chaotic dance of somewhat ritual. There's a woman who's being pierced, her flesh is being pierced, and she's being almost like baptized. She takes her clothes off and she goes in this bathtub full of this green, almost greenish colored water. She goes under the water. Meantime, there's the mannequin that Bowie is singing beside, and the head is sometimes turned upside down. It's just chaos, right? It's like everything is topsy-turvy. They eventually take the head off and they saw the body, and they replace the head with the bull's head, And so they are recreating essentially this Minotaur figure. And then they're seen dancing around it. It looks like they're almost kind of, right, worshipping it. But then one thing I noticed, because the video flashes Samuel Bayer directed, guy who did the Nirvana video for Smells Like Teen Spirit. And it also is certainly influenced by Nine Inch Nails' Closer video of 94. But at times, what I was going to say is, right, so it's flashing, and right, so Bowie is singing and he's doing things, and it's got the outside and people, this kind of like chaotic thing, and it's just the edits are very fast. And so unless you're kind of really watching closely, or you're slowing it down or pausing it or something to look at it closely, you miss things, or I miss things. And so having seen this thing so many times and even kind of used bits of it in my own work, especially for Minotaur, which I'll get back to, for several videos I've used clips of that in different ways, and I've slowed down and reversed and re-effectorized and used it in different ways. But because the Minotaur, there's so many clips showing this figure, and Bowie with the Minotaur, the bull's head mask that he takes off at the end of the video, revealing that it was him, kind of thing. All these things. He even dances around with it on at some point. But then separate from that, there's this mannequin body with the head of the bull. So they're worshipping it. But then when I freeze frame, there was one bit that I almost freeze frame, not accidentally, incidentally. They're laughing at it. So either they're worshipping or they're mocking it. They've created it, but then they're kind of also mocking it. And then at the end, toward the end of the video, you have like the Last Supper kind of scene, this long table with this, it's not Bowie, it's another figure with a very thin man with the shirts off, and I guess the Jesus figure, but again, it's not exactly that either. And he puts his head down like this after everyone's left. But at one point, it's just chaos. People throwing things, food, and, food all over the face and just dripping. And it's tribal and chaotic and ritualistic. And Bowie talks in interviews about how society is falling. Well, he talks about fragmentation a lot. Or he was talking a lot about that in the mid-90s. He kind of changes his tune a bit in 2000. Well, he still talks about fragmentation, but so ritual and replacing, and right, so people piercings and piercing the nose and the cartilage and the eyebrows and the nipples, and some really painful piercings that people were getting, sort of like that, right, and tattoos and tribal tattoos, and a way of trying to, in this one interview clip that was from a radio broadcast, which I can share at some point, he talks about how this woman asks him about it, and she says, is this the ritual body art piercing, or, these aspect of the outside story and visual and the whole thing, does it have to do with your interest in Duchamp and Deleuze and Guattari and these things? And Bowie answers that, maybe I'll share the clip, but he talks about that, and he also says, apparently it's a radio broadcast, so there's no visual, but she has like a piercing in her nose or something, and he says, so you're doing this, many people doing this just like you, dear, are doing this kind of thing, because all we can do is control our own body. So body has become the center thing for this ritual. And in my Minotaur film, just to talk for a moment, actually, but this is sharing what Bowie's fascination was, are these artists who ritually cut themselves, body modification, and these outsider artists doing this. Joe the Lion from Heroes is about this guy who did just that, doing this. I always forget his name. He doesn't have a difficult name. Joe the Lion nailed me to my car. I'll tell you who you are, because literally he that was one of his stunts, if you will, that they nailed him to a Volkswagen. And he did all these crazy things. I think of like Wittgenstein's, not Wittgenstein, sorry, that's a philosopher. It's another Stein, not Epstein, not Wittgenstein, that did these kinds of, people with like just horrible disfiguration. And anyway, I'm looking at this. Be careful, Ariadna. I'm your labyrinth, right? The labyrinth is the other thing. But he doesn't talk much about the labyrinth. He was in the film Labyrinth, but he doesn't talk about the labyrinth of the Minotaur very much in the outside, on the album or on Leon or anywhere. But the Minotaur is in his labyrinth, and he is a solitary figure. And I talked about this in 2023 before I did the first part of my bona fide triptych between 23 and 25. And then this year, I did a fourth part, which I just called Minotaur. And the first was called Lost in the Minotaur's Lair. So that was, and that came from that seg from 2022, which was seg : Minotaur / artist, rather than artist / Minotaur, which is how Bowie called that character. Now, let me talk a bit about Bowie's character and outside. Who and what is the Minotaur? And why do I feel, and I believe Bowie felt, was so central, even though the Minotaur, firstly, maybe it's, let me just say quickly, he's not mentioned in any of the Leon session material that is available. The 70 minutes really fleshes out more for us Ramona A. Stone's character, and especially, even more so, Baby Grace Blue. Her seg is much longer, her hard cassette is much longer, and also Algeria Touch Freak. Those spoken segs are much longer, much more fleshed out, and there's more of Ramona in song as well. She sings, We'll Creep Together, etc., etc. I won't go into now, but there's, apart from her spoken seg, which is longer, and that piece is quite long in Leon, unlike on Outside, it's a very 3-4 minute track with a very short seg. There's other parts later on where she's singing, and she's really like very fascist in the sense that she's a fascist in her art is so divine, and others are kind of, she's looking down on everyone else kind of thing. It's interesting. But I'm not going to talk about Ramona so much right now. I'm going to talk about Minotaur. So there's no Minotaur seg or voice or spoken bit or anything on Leon on the 70 minutes that were released. There may be. Elsewhere in the sessions, we don't have more than 70 minutes from those apparently hours and hours and hours and hours of sessions he did. I imagine the Minotaur's on there somewhere, maybe. But maybe not. He's not on the 70 minutes. And also, more evidence for the possibility that he's not on there as a voice is that he's not on Outside either. The Minotaur is on the CD itself when the CD came out. Bowie's, there's the bull-headed man and the hands, which are red, outstretched. And one thing that's interesting in this article, it's in the second part, which let me get back to that, is that he published, or rather, sorry, he, here. In 1993, Bowie created a series of 14 computer prints and collages to a play by a certain Joni Vassad, like de Sade, right? Marquis de Sade, Joni Vassad. We saw a Minotaur, which there's a photo of this book. I have no idea where to find this thing. I looked online, I couldn't find it. In late September 1994, 14 sets of numbered sign sheets were printed and contributed for, quote, the Little Pieces from Big Star's charity auction that ran on October 4th, 1994, along with a postcard set labeled A. The central figure of the series was a charcoal drawing of a dying Minotaur, kneeling and having, obviously, Bowie's own hands. So Bowie did a Minotaur that's dying in this set, and the hands are his hands. And I think that's the Minotaur there. And also, sorry, but it's got a very obvious stiff member protruding from its, okay? If it's the same one, actually, there's another one where it's standing and holding its member, okay? So it's pretty obviously sexualized in Bowie's versions. And again, right, you have the ritual with the women and the sacrifices. And there's also something I had read that he, I think it's once every 9 years they sent 7 boys and 7 girls to be sacrificed, to be eaten by the Minotaur. But the sexual thing is part of it. But it has Bowie's hands and it's dying in his postcard set, and that was the central piece. Let me read a bit more of this. The piece was said to be a tribute to Picasso, and again, Picasso did this series of Minotaur. I used some of those images in shared them, kind of flashed them on the screen in my Minotaur film, which I want to talk about, and in the live show, which actually the film was created as I was creating backing video for the show that I planned to do, which now I've been doing. So the two Minotaur, actually, the Minotaur film documentary that I did, it's over an hour and a half. The Minotaur show that I'm now doing, which I'll talk about, which uses video projections, which uses bits of that. And also the Minotaur album, which is the album I did this year. Between 23 and 25, I did a triptych, starting with Lost in the Minotaur's Lair. The Minotaur is a central figure in my series. I'm going to be talking about this, why, and this, I want to talk about Minotaur artist, or artist Minotaur, but mine is Minotaur artist. Okay, going back to Bowie and the Minotaur. So it was said to be a tribute to Picasso. Likely it was, this author says, though the manner of drawing with its unexpectedly good form shaping in a non-anatomic way. I don't think this author is a native speaker of English, so I'm going to correct the English, even though it's not exactly how it's written. Rather, reminds one of, I think, the artworks by Michael Ayrton. So that M. Ayrton's Michael Ayrton. So he does this series of castrated, the horns are chopped and he's castrated, he's dying. And again, I shared some of these, not all of them, but some of these in that film too. Bowie's, some of the We Saw Minotaur prints were also presented in the Cork Street Gallery exhibition, quote, New Afro-Pagan Work, 75 through 95. And also the original drawing was exhibited at the Atrium Bookshop. So what's the point to this is that in 93, he created the series. And then in 94, they were exhibited at the end of the year in Berkeley Square Gallery, along with Ayrton's, and he acquired Ayrton's etches of the Minotaur. So he was collecting these, and he was also interested in Picasso's Minotaur. And then in 95, some of the prints were presented in the New Afro-Pagan Work and at the Atrium bookstore in that area. So Bowie was doing all this Minotaur artwork. Now, I'm going to repeat this for those who are familiar with what I'm talking about. The Leon of 94, which proceeded outside, which was originally to be released, which the label rejected and told him to go back into the studio and make songs. He went back in 95, New York, with Eno and Gabrels and Garson and so on, and did The Heart's Filthy Lesson, Hollow Space Boy, Through These Architects' Eyes, re-recorded Strangers Only Meet, I Haven't Been to Oxford Town, all the songs that we think about. I Am With Name came from Leon. It's on Leon in a longer version. The Segs were highly edited, truncated versions of what's on Leon. And I want to make a quick comment, even though this is mainly about the Minotaur, and the Minotaur doesn't have a seg. We'll get back to my version and why I chose to do that and make him the central figure of my triptych, and now obviously what I'm doing with it now, which this triptych of albums 23 through 25, but then now there's also 3 parts. There's the album, the documentary, and the live show that this year, all having to do with the Minotaur. I want to say this about Leon and the segs on Outside. The thing that listeners at the time and to date, likely you ask people who listen to that album, say, 1, it's too long, 75 minutes, 2, the segs are unnecessary and confusing. They are for 2 reasons. Without being an apologist, the first thing is that they are because Bowie warns us this is a non-linear Gothic hyper cycle, etc., etc. I think that's ironic. I think that's meant to be pretentious and ironic, and I think at the same time he's telling us, don't expect closure, don't expect linearity, don't expect a story that starts at point A, moves to B, C, denouement, climax, and you get it wrapped up at the end. So the segs are this, and they give us these little truncated bits of the story that we still don't understand. But the second part, the second reason they're so confusing is because they're really, 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 really chopped up, and the versions on Leon, and I've only heard what's available to the public, 70 minutes worth, as I mentioned earlier, Ramona A. Stone's seg, Algeria Touch Freak's seg, Baby Grace's seg, and those are basically the 3 segs, and then the Nathan Adler segs are much longer. And as far as Nathan Adler, actually, there are Nathan Adler dialogue bits, come to think of it, on Leon too, and he does say much more on Leon, and he gives us more background. And I think we understand more about the fact that he had been involved with Ramona A. Stone romantically, perhaps, or he was obsessed with her, and then she was involved with Leon, and then she broke it off with Leon, and he became the fall guy for the murder of Baby Grace. Who murdered Baby Grace? Some say Ramona, some say Leon. He's accused. He seems to be, but it seems like he's the fall guy. Some say could be Nathan. Who and what is the Minotaur? Minotaur, say I change every time, Minotaur. Well, many have interpreted that the Minotaur is the murderer, but the Minotaur is not a person. The Minotaur doesn't have a seg, doesn't speak, doesn't have a voice, only has songs assigned to be sung by Nathan Adler, to be sung by Leon Blanc. I have not been to Oxford Town. To be sung by Minotaur. Wishful Beginnings. I'm Deranged. Nathan Adler sings No Control, which ends with It's All Deranged. So some have linked Nathan Adler with the Minotaur, which would maybe implicate him in the murder as a possibility, that he was possessed by the Minotaur and killed Baby Grace. He went crazy, no control, I'm deranged, it's the angel man. Ramona, we know, is basically a murderer, so it's quite possible that she was involved directly and or indirectly. It's possible that Nathan and Ramona murdered Baby Grace. Maybe Nathan was deranged. Maybe Nathan had been given interest drugs too, or something like this. Now I'm really stretching it, but it's possible that he was deranged, possessed by the so-called Minotaur, which the Minotaur requires the sacrifice of young boys and girls. And there's often a sexual aspect which is not directly stated or suggested in either Outside or Leon in Baby Grace's seg. But let me get to the Baby Grace seg, the murder, because that's important. If Minotaur murders her, whether it's Nathan or Ramona or whoever's possessed by this Minotaur. And Ramona, by the way, could be, Ramona's a woman, but maybe Ramona's actually, she's part robot, she's part machine, she's part male, maybe, and female. It's, I feel female, good timing drone. So, to me, Ramona could be, actually, could have been a man, which would suggest that Nathan is also homosexual, that Leon is also maybe homosexual. I mean, no one talks about this. But with Bowie, do you like girls or boys? Boys or girls? Girls or boys in Hollow Space Boy? It's confusing these days. People say, well, that's him referencing his bisexual so-called past of Ziggy Stardust Aladdin, same period, glam period. But it could also be part of this. It could also be that Nathan is bisexual implicitly, or maybe, closet, whatever. But if he was involved with Ramona, and Ramona maybe is actually not really 100% born, maybe not born a woman, and so Leon too would then be in that category. Do you like girls or boys? Do you like girls or boys? And they murder Baby Grace Blue. The other ironic aspect is that Baby Grace Blue and every other character, including Ramona, the two female characters that we have are Ramona A. Stone, who I've just suggested maybe actually, I feel female, good timing drone, maybe actually a man to begin with. And Baby Grace, of course, supposed to be a 14-year-old girl that's sacrificed in the name of art, but it's a ritual. It's an art. The full title is right. The Nathan Adler Diaries. It's the art ritual murder of Baby Grace. The art ritual murder. Of course, that connects with Bowie's themes of ritualistic art, piercing, tattooing. I didn't talk about Damien Hirst. That's part of it in the blocks of cutting up an animal and putting it in glass boxes and presenting that as art in a museum. And Bowie was involved with that aspect, him, and interested in that. That's part of the story. It goes very deep, but around Baby Grace, the characters in the Minotaur, the acolyte, get back to that with the eyes covered. And I want to talk a little bit about this too, because I also did my version of this. And I want to talk about this later. I guess this will maybe be an hour-long talk. Anyway, right? So the art ritual murder, what I wanted to say is Ramona, possibly male, and of course Bowie, it's his face morphed, just like the Minotaur's hands are Bowie's hands. Okay? And the Minotaur's dying, Bowie's thinking about his death at age 48, when he released Outside, and going on 49, and then turning 50 in 97 with Earthling, right? So that Baby Grace, what I want to say is a female, 14-year-old girl in the story, but two things that suggest a male aspect to her. One is that the original version of the Nathan Adler Diary, which was published in Q magazine, when it was republished in Outside, it was changed apparently. It was the art ritual murder of Baby Grace Bellou, like Adrienne Bellou. It was some kind of potshot joke about Adrienne Bellou, apparently. Now, this may be stretching it, but that might suggest something male about her, right? Because Adrienne Bellou is not a woman. Okay, it was changed to Baby Grace Blue. But what I want to say is, like Ramona, the character visually is Bowie dressed as Baby Grace Blue. And if you've seen the original versions that Jennifer Elster took the photos, and then they morphed it with a computer to make him look more like a girl. and to look younger. But if you see it, it's him, Bowie, 48 years old, Bowie, wearing the girl's outfit and looking scared with the long hair wig. You know, it's a man, obviously. It's not a woman, not a girl. And then the face is morphed, and if you look at on outside, you can see that it's Bowie. They all have his eyes, too. It's like an obvious thing that he, I think, wanted it to be, right? The blue and the brown, or the eye that was discolored because of, or looks discolored because the pupil is large on the one side, right? That's intentionally, didn't mess with that. So all the characters have Bowie's eyes, and features of his face are the same, obviously, for Ramona, for Nathan, for Algeria Triptych, and for Baby Grace. So Baby Grace is not obviously a 14-year-old girl. She's David Bowie, David Jones, David Bowie, let's say, and the voice of Ramona and the voice of Baby Grace, right? I mean, I can do the same, and I did my own Baby Blue, I called it, seg, and I did Ramona AI seg, and I used some kind of similar, I imagine, effectors to what Brian Eno used to change Bowie's voice. You know, you can change the pitch and you can layer it and do things with it. Like Ramona's voice is layered, and Baby Grace is just the pitch is raised to make him sound more like a girl, but it doesn't sound natural. He doesn't really sound like a 14-year-old girl. And Ramona, his voice just sounds digitized and weird and played, right, the effects. So I think this thing with male-female is also here. And the Minotaur, right? So the Minotaur is the murderer, so he must be the central figure. The Minotaur has Bowie's hands in the red. And the ritual is done in the name of art. The ritual is done for the Minotaur, just like they would send these children or these young men and women to the lair to be sacrificed by the Minotaur. Right? So, this is what is happening. I'm sorry I paused because I just got a message notification that was really rude from some anonymous person on some social media thing. I don't care about it, but you see, this world we're living in. I want to talk about this. Maybe this is a cue. I've just talked fairly at length, 40 minutes almost, about Bowie's versions, about Leon a bit, about the Segs, about the Minotaur, the figure, about Nathan and his connection perhaps with the Minotaur, about ritual, sacrifice. I want to talk about Marc Lowe's Minotaur. Let me preface it, go back to the Triptych, but I want to focus on this year's Triptych, which is not a triptych of albums, it's an album, a documentary or a film, what to call it. It's a music film documentary. Has some of Bowie's things, has some of my things, has some other things. And the live show performance. I talked to John Majori, who runs the Bowie blog, about the first two parts after I just put out Some Kind of Future 2.0. And then again, later in 2025, he was kind enough to interview me about Bowie and dystopia and to ask me, as part of that interview at the end, about my latest, which was the third and final, I thought, part of the Triptych, which was There Is No Hell. That's a lyric from The Motel from Outside, and I covered that song for that album. And so the first part, as I've mentioned already, came from the Seg, which has the Minotaur as a central figure, and there's also another character that speaks that I didn't assign a name or but it's something like, to my mind, it was like a Nathan Adler's son or cousin, or I don't know, somebody, but he's in Shibuya in Tokyo because, hey, I'm here, huh? Kind of like the Minotaur has Bowie's hands. I have to personalize it a little bit. I'm not living in New York or New Jersey, Oxford town, although I'm from New Jersey, originally, ironically. So he meets Ramona in Shibuya, and she says, she's convinced this voice character, unnamed character of mine, says in the seg, convinced World War III is upon us, Elias Mauss and all his devious doings, there would be required for all of us brain patches, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a line from Nathan Adler that I copped, which is in homage. And that's where the seg trails off. So in 2022, I was looking at news, I was seeing things. Elias Mauss, EM is obviously a reference to Elon Musk. Brainpatch, which is in Bowie's longer seg, for Baby Grace, says they have me wearing a brain patch with the shakers on it and this neurotransmitter, and they're giving her interest drugs, and she's watching a television with this propaganda of the new homelands and this influencer who's she says an influence, it sounds like an influencer who is a news coaster. She says a news coaster in the homelands, that's the new homelands. And I recognized this individual, one of the small friends, which is another sort of group that we don't get that many details about, but there's more in the Leon than there is on Outside. But the small friends, Ramona says at the end of the seg on Outside, I know who the small friends are. The small friends, this kind of group of, in this dystopia world. He was one of the small friends. He was he was an influence because he was great, I'm losing it. He was the leader, he was the one who made soul patches the laws, after she says brain patches, soul patch, brain patch. He requires all of us to have these things in our brains. And so in my seg, there would be required for all of us brain patches. I was looking at Neuralink and saying, well, hey, and what I've seen in more recent days is like on these I'm not a Christian. Number one, I'm not Christian. Number two, I'm certainly not far left, far right, far anything religious. But I get these things on YouTube, these Christian believers saying that the Neuralink is like the sign of the mark of the beast, the coming of the end. That once the mind can be controlled through a chip in your brain or a chip in your body, that's the mark of the beast. So, that's in 2022. I wasn't thinking about that. I didn't know that until recent days. I've been seeing this more, but I was seeing this Neuralink thing and it freaked me, and I thought, okay, as I was riffing, it was the brain patch, was the Neuralink. And now it's, developed beyond. I mean, that was 2022, 2024, he's talking about how they successfully implanted it in a human. And people have them in their heads now. They're literally doing it. And they'll get to the point where you don't have to open your skull, where they can just, insert in your wrist or something, apparently. This is science fiction, but this is happening now, not tomorrow or yesterday. So these elements crept in, and what I didn't know in 2022 also, I couldn't know, was Elias Mauss and his devious doings, World War III is upon us. In the seg, those words were spoken, came out of my mouth just spontaneously, and they were repeated several times in Lost in the Minotaur's Lair. I used that bit on the longer piece I created called Minotaur's Lair. And then I kept sort of bringing the refrain back in other pieces. I would use bits of that. And this year's Minotaur, which I'll talk about later, the final Minotaur or Minotaur piece, again, I use that in a different way. the samples of that and the Minotaur speaking. So this is bringing the story into the present, and Bowie's Brainpatches in the Leon version. Not Ramona, but what Baby Grace tells us in her longer hard cassette in the New Homelands, with this thing and watching the television where she can only watch what they let her watch. She can't speak to anyone except the breeders in Longcliffe or in the Enclave. Was it the breeders in the Enclave and the etc. And now they want me to be quiet and to worship the lot. And to worship the lot, she says. That's also cut from the Outside version. And also she mentions Jeffrey's Eat the Press. I'm watching a television, Jeffrey's Eat the Press. And I think that was maybe, my guess is a reference to Jeffrey Dahmer. But, you know, like this thing with the Minotaur, with the concubines, and then you have, this was Epstein, and then Jeffrey's Eat the Press. So when I did Heart's Filthy Lesson, actually it was the second time I did it. I did a version in 2018, which I don't like quite as much, but it opens with "Hello Leon, would you like something fishy?" which comes right from The Enemy is Fragile, which I also covered this year finally. All those things connect my interest in this to Leon from years back, but the Jeffrey's Eat the Press just came out of my mouth when I was doing Heart's Filthy Lesson, this year's version. And then I said, Jeffrey's ate the press. He's eating the press up, right? And Jeffrey's created a war in Iran, perhaps, too. From the grave, from beyond the grave, from beyond. So you see how all these things converge in my version inversions, and this is not planned. This is just, okay. So Jeffrey's Eat the Press, and when I have not been to Oxford Town this year. I wasn't planning on doing, but as I was singing, I have not been to Epstein Town rather than Oxford Town. It just came out of my mouth, and I was going to change it. I thought it was too obvious and blunt and kind of, you know, but I ended up just leaving it because that's how it came out. So I finished the Triptych last year. John interviewed me, and then this year I started just bit by bit I just couldn't stop. There were other covers from the Outside album I decided to do. Like last year, the end of the year, I did what I did Outside. I did Motel. Those things ended up on There Is No Hell. And I did my final, I thought, Minotaur's Seg, where he talks about bringing the story up to the present. And in 2022, I predicted that Elon Musk, or Elias Mauss, would be, you know, creating havoc. And what I was going to say earlier, what I couldn't know is that he would have been so heavily involved in getting Trump reelected in politics. He would have been on the podium giving the Nazi salute. All those things came to pass. And so when I recorded Outside the song, there was, you know, it's happening outside the Capitol building. And I talked about this with John, so I don't want to go into it. I want to talk about the last 10 or 15 minutes here, this year's Triptych of Minotaur, which wasn't planned as a triptych. I'm thinking about it now, it kind of is. The album, which it was going to be called Inside, and it was going to be, I called it Inside originally because I did mostly songs from outside. Part of this was thanks to John. I'm going to say thanks to John. Our dialogue over the years has informed my follow-up albums. If John's watching this, I think he knows this already, but like the second part, Some Kind of Future, I used a clip of him interviewing me about the Leon sessions. And then in There Is No Hell, I opened up also the first track. I decided to do something like this. I used a clip of him interviewing me about the prior album. What is Some Kind of Future 2.0? Tell us, Mark. So his voice is there at the beginning of both of those, the second, third part. The first part I did before we knew each other, of each other's existence. He found me online through my cover of I Can't Give Everything Away. and the video I made for it. So, and he interviewed me on other things. We talked about not only Leon sessions, he interviewed me later about Buddhism, he interviewed me about Buddhism and Bowie, and about teaching David Bowie at university, so, and dystopia. But he did a write-up on There Is No Hell before he interviewed me about it. And one thing he wrote was, and he also said to me in the interview, is that listening to it, because a lot of it's abstract improvisation around themes from Outside and Leon, and I sing bits of songs, like while I was walking outside filming myself, I was singing bits of songs that became these long improvs, and then the musical backing has nothing to do with Outside, it's my original improvised music. And then I did songs, and so those albums, the second, the third, are the longer improvs interspersed with covers, if you will, reinterpretations of songs from Outside, and there's some bits from Leon that I riff off of as well, and the segs, like I did my own Baby Grace seg, and I did my Ramona seg, and I did Anonymous Outsider seg, which is my own original thing for Some Kind of Future. But one thing John said was that it was helpful a little bit to have songs to latch onto and say, that's familiar. Like I'm Afraid of Americans is on Some Kind of Future 2.0, We Prick You. And I remember him saying in the interview, We Prick You is not one of the more popular songs from the album. It's not like Hello Space Boy or Outside or even Heart's Filthy Lesson or Strangers When We Meet, right? These kind of more recognizable pieces. But he said it was grounding just to have a song that he could recognize, or Voyeur of Utter Destruction. And then, of course, I did Outside and Motel and things like that on the last part. But as I was thinking about this year, what he was saying, I thought, well, maybe I'll cover some more of the songs. So I did a new version of Heart's Filthy Lesson. I did a new version I wanted to do of I'm Deranged. Those two I had done 2018, 2019. Actually, I was going to go back and remix them or rearrange them, but those files are long gone from Logic because I had computer crashes. They're gone. The story I told John is I almost lost the Minotaur artist seg, the original seg, which has, without it, this series would not exist. So I had a computer crash, but I had saved it in Logic. I was very lucky to have it on an external drive. And hence I was able to create the series starting in 23. So there's that. And so I did, like I said, Deranged and Heart's Filthy Lesson. But I also ended up having been to Oxford Town. And I also really had wanted from the very beginning to do The Enemy is Fragile, which is actually a song fragment from the Leon sessions. It's actually, I feel, the most complete song in itself. It's a 5-minute song, basically 4.5, 5-minute song that could work as a standalone. And I had planned on doing it for a long time. And so I ended up finally doing my version of it, finally. And so I was going to call the album Inside, and I was going to call it The Enemy is Fragile, and actually put it up on BandCamp under those names at first. And then I decided to call it just Minotaur, because I did this long Minotaur seg. Actually, that's what started it. I was thinking that I want to do Minotaur live. I want to do a longer tribute to this series that I did, this triptych, and I started making, the backing I had for Outside and the video. I started creating videos for them. So I did Outside, and Motel I did a new edit of it. I had done Small Plot of Land, but I haven't done that live. But things I could use with backing. So I started doing these songs. I did No Control, which I wanted to do. Actually, I did that before redoing Heart's Filthy Lesson, I'm Deranged, which were toward the end. And then the last thing I did was Have Not Been to Oxford Town. So The Enemy is Fragile. I had the idea for the video to wrap my eyes with a cloth I had sitting around here. It was like I had this white piece, and I just thought I wanted to do a video for this after I did the recording and mixed it. I thought of The Acolyte, which comes from the Schwarzkogler. I always get his name wrong. Is that right? Okay, so actually my phone cut off when I opened this. So Rudolf Kogler, this is the guy, Action Series AKTION, and he did the thing with the eye wrap and the fish wrap around the body, and Bowie was really emulating that. And I don't know, actually, I don't remember where I saw the reference, if Bowie called this the Acolyte, or if the fans, people just start calling it the Acolyte. He's an Acolyte, right? But in my version, or what I kind of thought about after I had done, is that, right, we're blind. We're not seeing things. We're not seeing what's going on behind the scenes. Society is not seeing that we have ritual murders happening and young girls being sexually used, abused, taken advantage of, possibly murdered and eaten, and all this stuff coming out now from the Epstein files, and etc. Not just that part, but just all the things that were too. And actually, when I was doing my improv 2 years prior, the summer of 24 for Some Kind of Future, and I was riffing off of The Enemy is Fragile, but hadn't done the cover proper yet. And actually I put that in the background of the track after I covered it. It's in the backing. It's We Cannot See For We Are Too Blind. And so that image really worked with The Enemy is Fragile, I thought, and my video version. Bowie never released the song. There's no video. There's no official video. Somebody put together a video version on YouTube that's not official, and it's from something else. It's from the Hunger HBO series that Bowie was in. So I had my own kind of acolyte. There's no fish wrap in the body, and I'm not doing after Rudolf Schwarzkugler as Bowie did, but that was that. And this, these artists that Bowie was interested in, Schwarzkugler is one of them, and the other, Guy Debord is another. All these people are mentioned in the Nathan Adler write-up in this story, and if you read it carefully, these guys are all mentioned, people cutting themselves up and doing. Bowie was talking about these people, and you can see the influence there. He mentions Hearst, and he mentions all this stuff too. Anyway, I don't want to go into too much of this, but in my Minotaur film, which I call a documentary with music inspired by Outside and Leon, I also call it a nonlinear hypercycle after David Bowie. And it has music from Leon Suites in it, some of it. And I did a slideshow showing some of these photos, these artists that Bowie was influenced by. And it's that thing with body ritual. And it's like he was talking about the piercings and the tattoos, and, the people were torturing their bodies basically to transcend the body, maybe, or find their new god, to build their new god, their Minotaur, right? Like they take in the Heart's Filthy Lesson, right? They're pouring, looks like milk on it, or then there's like blood or red paint, and Bowie's face, he's got red on at some point, and the red hands of the Minotaur. It's death, it's blood, it's ritual, it's sexuality, it's all of it. It's baptism and the Last Supper, but the Last Supper is now chaos because God is dead, right? And so Minotaur is central to everything. And that's, again, going back to why I decided to call this whole thing Minotaur. And the first part, actually, I did in 23. Well, the seg was Minotaur/artist. First album was Lost in the Minotaur's Lair, and the central piece of that is Minotaur's Lair. The last part ends with, last year's ends with Minotaur 2.0, Minotaur's Lair 2.0, where he brings the story up to date with Elias, Mauss, and Brainpatches. And Elias, Mauss, EM, getting involved in all kinds of things politically. Minotaur film explores this more deeply, makes it more obvious in visual form. And let me talk about the Minotaur film. So how did I start? Why did I start this? I was already creating tracks. I was making videos for the tracks to use as the backing videos for the live show. So I want to do the live show, so I start recording new songs that I wanted to perform live. Those became audio recordings. Then I want to do the videos for them, so I'd have the video backing for the live show. So then I have audio and I have video, so then I have music video. And then I want to put together I wanted to do Minotaur's Lair basically in a slightly rearranged version live. So I want to do backing for that, and then I would do an improv live. That was my idea with video. So I started combining video footage from all the different things I had done over the years, including like This Dark Shrouds, O Ramona, Where's the Future Gone from 2023, which actually got me working on Minotaur's Lair in September of that year. Going back to the original seg. I talked to John Majori about this. So I had John's thing in my head doing songs rather than just improvs, but also I want to do a long Minotaur improv live. So I created that video. I ended up with a new Minotaur track that became a 20-minute thing that I could use as an improv, but it also became a 20-minute video and audio track that ends the Minotaur album. But then I have The Enemy is Fragile and the new version of Hearts Filthy and all the other ones. So I ended up with a full-length album, which I called Minotaur, and I used a screenshot of myself with the blindfold, and I called it Minotaur. I actually added to that something. I won't talk too much. Take a close look at the cover. It's got other stuff in the background, and if anyone can figure out what that is, you get bonus points. Hint is that it's mentioned in the Nathan Adler diary. Okay. So, and then I ended up creating the film with the Bowie interview clips, him talking about the internet in 99, the famous clip, and other things, him talking about spirituality, new gods, clips of me talking with John Majori, clips of me doing talks like this, talking about my series and the Brainpatches and all that. And then some of the Leon music and the slideshows and me reading part of the Nathan Adler diary, which I had done prior to, and also my music videos from last year, from before that, the Minotaur bits, the new stuff. And then I did new versions. I also did a new version of Hello Space Boy for this album, which I had done in 2024 for another album. You see how confusing this gets. But anyway, it's all central to Minotaur. And the themes from the last few years have been in real time. It's happening now, not tomorrow. So when Elon Musk gets up on the stand in 25 and does the Nazi salute, that becomes part of Outside, the song, and people protesting outside the Capitol building. Everything's in real time. And so this year, The Enemy is Fragile and all the things going on, those things are part of Minotaur, part of the video, and part of the live show. Everything with Epstein, and even now I'm starting to put Peter Thiel in a bit, although that's not part of this yet, but it's for the first time. Actually, the last show I did, for the first time I put a bit of that in Palantirs, and because it's part of this whole thing. And World War III is upon us, right? So this is how it goes. So I do have the album Minotaur, the cover with the blindfold, has The Enemy is Fragile on it. That's one piece from Leon. Has a number of Outside interpretations, reinterpretations, songs, and ends with this newly arranged Minotaur 20-minute piece, original piece. It also starts, I didn't mention this, it starts with a song called Space Boy's Return, which I had re-recorded. It's actually a song from 2018, original electronica song that's very Outside-ish and mentions Space Boy. So I had done in 2023 a re-recording of that. Or the end of 23, and I think I published in the beginning of 24, We Miss You, Space Boy. And I used an instrumental version on last year's There Is No Hell. So this, I went back to the original. I had the original file. I found it, and it had a version of mix that I really liked that I hadn't released. And so I tweaked it and I remixed it. It's similar to what I had, but I remixed it and sounds much better now, I think. And that opens the album. So that's an original. It opens with an original. It closes with an original. The Minotaur, 20-minute Minotaur piece. And then it's Bowie covers From Outside and The Enemy's Fragile. The film, which was made as part of prep for the live show and then the live shows. Let me end this talk with John Majority. I asked him both times. Well, no, I asked him once about if he would have time to do an interview, to talk with me, not an interview, but to talk with me again on Zoom about the Minotaur film. And he said he's all booked up, he can't. But he said, I'll mention it. And he said, send me this and do that. And so I did. And I published it on December 31st, the end of last year, because Bowie's Nathan Adler Diaries, it's like the ritual murder takes place on the night of December 31st, 1999. Right as we shift to 2000 was the idea. It's not quite the millennium, is it? It's 2021 would be... 2001 would be the millennium, but Y2K. So I published it on the last day of December. And he published this December 30, 2025. And just real quickly, he says, as we approach the 10th anniversary of Bowie's death, I find myself not simply reflecting on Bowie, but on my larger Bowie project, which began with a series of Facebook posts I committed to myself to publish every day for a year after learning the news. And he goes on to talk about this, and he said, Marc Lowe has been part of the journey since I started posting interviews nearly 2 years ago. And he mentions how he found me online and how he's done this. And then he says, Marc communicates even casually in a nonlinear way. His work and his conversations tends to loop back on itself. Is this true? You tell me. And includes references to past and future material, which makes it what I think Bowie meant by a hypercycle, like a hyperlink. And he goes on. And this is his interpretation of me and my work. And he says... couple things. He says it's nearly impossible to digest or even follow all of Marc's output, which, whether intends it to be so or not, functions as a version of the cut-up technique. An individual piece, like an individual line Bowie cut out of its context, makes sense, often very clearly so, but every individual video, song, album, or lecture from Marc exists outside a complete context. So his interpretation tends to be that everything I do can be just put in a blender and sort of, it's kind of has context within its, I guess, things relating to each other in some way, but they can also be taken out of context. And Bowie kind of does this with his cut-ups. Heart's Filthy Lesson, the lyrics were famously blended up in his verbicizer program on the Mac, which was created for him by a friend or something, a programming friend. And John is saying that my work is something like this for him. He says, another similarity between Marc and Bowie concerns an idea Bowie expressed, but likely only half believed. Never played at the gallery, etc. This is a very famous quote by Bowie saying, remember why you did it, and stay genuine to your art. But he says that Marc, challenges the audience in ways unlike Bowie. Although Marc has made some fairly conventional Bowie covers, what he really excels at is taking a seed from Bowie and adapting it. Often the seed is dark. Marc will borrow the lyrics but downs them in inky blackness. Some of Marc's music is tough to hear, but in the way Schindler's List or Platoon are tough to watch. And he goes on and talks about the hypercycle. And then he says, what is Minotaur? I don't know. As I write this, I haven't seen it. And he tries to paraphrase what I said about it, though. Okay. Beyond its connection to outside, Marc said Minotaur functions as a commentary on contemporary culture. He described it as engaging with humanity's growing tendency to replace traditional concepts of God and religion with what he characterized as a modern triad of technology, the internet, and artificial intelligence. This is John echoing back what I wrote to him. So this is a very meta thing I'm doing here. And also I'm reminding myself of what I said to him. He sees this, he being me, Marc Lowe, as an idea Bowie returned to repeatedly over the course of his career, both in music and interviews. And then he mentions that I'm talking about the Jeremy Paxman interview in '99, where Bowie says internet is an alien life form, and that's in the Minotaur film. Again, John says, in this sense, Minotaur is not presented as a definitive explanation of Bowie's ideas or of one outside, but as a work that exists alongside them, drawing from Bowie's imagery and concerns while refracting them through Marc's own artistic lens. And then he more recently published, as Bowie Cover the Week, my video presentation, hour-long, filmed by Takuya Mizukami in Fukuoka, of my Minotaur live show. The first time I did the premiere, and also the full, more or less full version, or a full version, hour-plus version, actually includes Hello Space Boy, which I published separately, because I want to keep the video to 1 hour. But, so John just says that, you know, I believe this to be the only solo artist multimedia version of anything like this, and he goes on to talk about how it also can be listened to out of order and out of context, and it's an art piece. And let me read his words to explain. He uses Nicholas Greco's David Bowie in Darkness, which I read that book and actually mentioned to John, then he read it, and now he's mentioning this, and he's going to be interviewing Greco. It's interesting that Eno wants a listener to consider vertical music that should be considered all at once rather than over time. Vertical music allows a listener to enter or exit the act of listening at any time. Ultimately, the logical progression of music is of no importance. Narrative might exist, but exists in the absence of teleology. Bowie's one outside as a non-linear narrative comes to mind here. And John thinks that this is a good way to view my music in general and how to approach it. And that's his interpretation. So, how to approach Minotaur, how to approach the Triptych, how to approach any parts of the Triptych, how to approach David Bowie's One Outside or Leon. That's all up to the listener or the viewer. And Bowie, in his talk where he's in the EPK on Outside, he's lying on a pillow and the camera's in front of his face here. They try to make it look like he's all comfortable on his bed. And he says, it's Duchamp. The viewer brings him or herself to it and participates in the making of the art. But in the age of AI, I think it's the anti-Duchamp is what's happened. The viewer, the listener, is not participating in the creation of the art. And this is tragic. This is the most tragic thing about AI. The viewer, the listener, is being taken out of the process completely. It is now unnecessary for a viewer or a listener to even bother making art or participating in making art. All they need to do is have the tiniest idea of what they want to see, and the AI does everything. And they haven't created anything. It's not even their work. This is the danger. This is the brain patch with the neurotransmitter, the interest drugs, propaganda, and the do we become like the machine? And this is the danger, and this is what Minotaur is warning against, in a nutshell. Neuralink and Palantir and just giving ourselves over to this technology fully and losing our ability to think and reason for ourselves, erasing history. It's very Orwellian. It really goes back to 1984 and Bowie's work on Diamond Dogs and Hunger City. That's the other major Bowie dystopia. Outside, to me, is more fertile ground for the present because we have Ramona and the whole thing with her being part machine and a murderer and the ritual murders and the Brainpatches and the internet. In Algeria, Triptych, I never really talk about him, but he's also this kind of, right? I sell eggshells off the she-sores and empty females. It's this thing, right? Again, the Epstein files. Maybe Algeria could have been the kind of guy who was in the Epstein files. He's a lonely guy at home, whatever, but maybe he was. I guess he's not one of the elites, so he wouldn't be in the Epstein files. But he's this kind of maybe guilty party too. So, there's so much more I could talk about, but it's getting quite long. So I'm going to stop here. It's also quite late. It's after 3 a.m. So the Minotaur is a huge project of mine, and it just keeps going because it's relevant. And yeah, I take the seed or the seeds and run with it. And the Minotaur is itself, right? Bowie's taking from Greek mythology. That's not his idea, or Picasso, right? It's not original idea either in that sense. It's all connected though. So Minotaur is my original work. It's also an homage because the Bowie's work, this thing has been so huge in my life ever since the first time I heard it and opened the booklet and read the Nathan Adler diaries and saw the Minotaur, and the whole thing just blew me open, blew my mind. I was already a Bowie fan, but this was like, wow. And then I was really disappointed, actually, in the direction it went after Outside. You know, it's funny because people are like, oh, Earthling, finally something, you know, it's catchier songs, I'm Afraid of Americans, which actually was from the Outside sessions. But I think Outside was, and Black Star, but Black Star is the end. And actually the Black Star video and Lazarus, I mean, those themes come back, right? And of course the end of his life. So, but the ritual, the things you see with the encrusted skull and the dancers and the shaking, and that's all very, actually, if you watch my video versions, I overlay the Heart's Filthy Lesson, some of the Heart's Filthy Lesson footage with the Minotaur and the jars of things and Bowie, you know, or the gaping mouth, and with the Black Star video. And especially the dancers and the ritual part, the second half of the video. Yeah, we're living in strange times. Thanks. I did this talk because what I want to say is, right, so John, thank you. He's been such a great, you know, supporter, and he interviewed me twice for the 2 albums and interviewed me other times and published these 2 essays on the Minotaur film and then on the video live film. Not the album, but that's okay. The Minotaur album, but that's the 3rd part. And maybe it's the least important in a way, but to me it's important, the audio. But it was actually in a way a side product of creating video for backing for the live show. So they're all interconnected. It's like its own self-enclosed triptych. The other triptych took me 2-3 years, and this one all together within the space of just a couple months. And now I'm doing the show, and I'll have one more show this coming Sunday where I'll do only 30 minutes, but it'll be a different version from what I did last time. Different selections and presented in a different way. So thank you. And thank you, John. I mentioned because John doesn't have time to interview me again on this stuff, so I want to talk about Minotaur a bit more like this. Good night, good morning, good day. Hang in if you're affected by the news, which I sure am. A horror show out there.